I'm Dave Smith for Police One, and this is Roll Call Reality Training. Now today we're going to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're going to find an off-duty officer in an unusual confrontation. Now this is going to give us a chance to think about off-duty encounters and other problems that you're going to see this officer face in this video. Now SWAT officer Stephen Arias was off-duty headed home after a day of rifle training when he heard a call come out. Now the call was a subject threatening a security guard and saying that he had a gun. So right there, it's a deadly force threat going out. Now he decides to respond before any of the on-duty units get there. He takes his long gun out and he approaches the suspect. Now the suspect, Dino Bailey, takes off, runs to a vehicle. And as our officer approaches the vehicle, a bystander begins to record it on his cell phone. So now we have the video of our officer making his approach and giving his initial commands. Listen to this.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get back on your knees.
All right, now we see the subjects exiting the vehicle. It appears he might be going to comply to the commands of the officer, but he doesn't. And watch what happens next.
Oh shit, Worldstar. Video camera.
Well, the chase is on, but this soon deteriorates into a wrestling match for the officer's long gun. Watch.
Worldstar, huh?
Stay down. Stay down.
Yeah. Worldstar, nigga. Worldstar.
Well, fortunately, soon backup arrives and the suspect's taken into custody. The officer was uninjured and the suspect really suffered minor wounds from the strike with the rifle that our officer did to help contain and maintain control of that weapon. Now, let's talk about a couple issues here. Now, the first thing, if you're off-duty, remember this. The thing you were told that first time in the academy when they talked about off-duty encounters, the brain's default setting in off-duty situations is be a good witness. You hear that? You say it. You probably say it to rookies when they come in your squad. But the thing is, we get swept up in the excitement, the momentum. And there is a chance we may have to get involved. So if you decide you've got to get involved, it's imminently important that you get involved, then first off, make sure you identify yourself effectively as a law enforcement officer. Do you have your credentials on you? Do you have your deadly force on you? Remember, off-duty, a lot of officers don't even have their basic control in terms of cuffs. We're not going to have any of our intermediate tools, so it's going to be a deadly force and then empty hand techniques. That's what we have off-duty generally, and that's what our officer has here. And remember, the responding units may or may not know who you are, and they may not know you're being involved. So it's very important that you think about, how do I respond to officers who are responding to this call? Expect to be treated like a suspect. That's okay. Follow the commands. And remember, I don't care what your rank is, uniform always trumps plainclothes in an off-duty encounter. Just remember that. In fact, on-duty encounters, remember that all the time. Now, this is good for us to remember too. Off-duty, always have your weapon. I hammer this and hammer this. But also, do you have cuffs available, flex cuffs, things like that available? Now, if possible, try to advise dispatch you're going to get involved or that you're involved in an encounter. This is important so responding units can know and dispatch can be aware of your safety as well. Teach your loved ones how to react when you react in a confrontational setting. Do they know how to call 911? Do they know how to give out your physical description and that you're a law enforcement officer and you're armed? That's very important. They know what to do. Do they know cover from concealment? Do they know all these things that you consider basic survival techniques? Well, let's teach them to our families. Remember, you don't know when you're going to be dragged into an off-duty encounter, and our off-duty is spent with the people we love. Now, finally, train with your off-duty equipment. If you carry a firearm or other control or other devices off-duty that you don't train with on-duty, it's your responsibility to train yourself to be totally competent with that device. Okay, now that's the stuff I wanted to discuss about off-duty encounters. But now let's talk about what we saw in this video. An officer armed with a long gun fighting to keep control of it. Now, this is the thing we have to take into account. The nature of this call was deadly force. Remember that. So he chose to take that long gun up. I talked to a couple defensive tactics experts that I really respect, Mark Dunstan and Jeff Chudwin, regarding retaining a long gun. They both train on this a lot. And one of the things they said is, look, the minute you make a choice to take a long gun into a less lethal encounter, you've got an anchor on you. Have you practiced? And this is something, all you trainers, think about this. If you're going to do long gun training, practice retention of that weapon with your people. Because remember, it has to be done in a split second without hesitation. We saw our officer do a great front kick. And also prior to that, he'd put the strap around himself. Now, ideally, the strap allows you to go to intermediate tools. But he had no intermediate tools except empty hand techniques. Now, do you practice butt strikes? Do you practice barrel strikes? Are these things that you do? It's important to understand this. So what's your department policy? These are all things I want you to discuss with your squad right now. Sit down, watch this video, and talk about what would you do? How would you react to this situation? Do you retain all of your equipment in training? Practice retention techniques. Cuffs, they're an edged weapon if they're not retained properly. How about your OC? It can disable you very easily. Your baton, you don't want to lose control of a baton and take a technique into the deadly force situation because you've lost control of your intermediate tool. Your handgun, you practice handgun retention, I'm sure. That's basic training. But how about our long guns, our shotguns? We practice that. Let's practice these things. This is an important tool. We got to be able to defend it and use it effectively. Now also, I want you to understand, do you maintain situational awareness all the time? We saw our officer go up. We knew there were witnesses there, and yet uniforms weren't there. The on-duty people hadn't gotten there yet. So we want to take into account the number of suspects, any bystanders or witnesses that are present that may or may not be good guys or bad guys. Whose side are they going to jump in on? These are all things you've got to maintain that awareness, be on duty and off duty. And another thing, finally, think about this. Off duty, if you're going to wear anything that identifies you as a law enforcement officer, you have to maintain that same situational awareness as if you're in a uniform. That's critical to think about. Another thing, our officer never stopped verbalizing throughout it. He did a good job. And that's something I want you to understand is so important. So now for us, think about these things we've talked about today. Maintain your physical skills, your abilities. Expect the unexpected everywhere you go, on and off duty. Practice fighting, empty hand techniques with your weapon in your hand. Do you know how to reholster with one hand? Can you reholster without looking? These are basic things to think about. And on and off duty, everyone should have to think about these situations when we have to retain a weapon, when a suspect, even though they're facing deadly force, fails to comply. It's a tough situation. So again, everybody sit down, talk with your squad about this. Supervisors, get answers from your people. I want them to have been thinking about this situation. This turned out really great in Albuquerque. With only the bad guy suffering minor injuries, the officer suffering none. But it could have easily been an ambush or something even more dangerous. And what if he'd lost control of that long gun? These are all things I want you to think about. We've got to be prepared. Remember, we're going to win, and we got to have our mindset ahead so we know exactly what tools to use, how to use them effectively.